This is Dan from Malformity, and you're watching RichardMetalFan.
Hey everyone, episode 255 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews here at a private location in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm here with my good friend Dan from the legendary Malformity. How are you doing today, Dan?
Good. How are you, Richard?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's a great afternoon here in Atlanta, and I'm here to finally have Malformity on my show.
Thanks for asking us to do this.
Anytime, anytime. So the format is I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of like talk about like the history of the band. So take me back to young Dan. So kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to be a vocalist and guitarist?
What first got me into metal? Well, let's see, in the late 80s, a lot of rock was really popular. So that was starting my, my window in the world of rock and metal. I mean, like the hair metal stuff in the late 80s. And then a friend of mine down the street, we were in 8th grade, he made me copies of Metallica and Megadeth. Another friend made me copies of Testament, Death Angel, Slayer, and that really is what opened a whole new world for me. And once I heard Slayer's Live Undead, like this, this is where it's been. I was 13 years old riding my bike around the neighborhood. Like, wow, this is where it's at.
Yeah.
And yeah, I actually started playing guitar when I was 12. So at that time though, I didn't have a real interest in rock or metal yet. I liked whatever was on the radio, and then, kind of metal came after guitar. And as far as what made me want to do vocals, I don't know, I just tried it and I was able to do it, so just kept at it.
All right. And what were your bands before starting up Malformity?
I didn't really have any. One of those same friends I mentioned, 13, 14, we tried to start a band, but nothing happened with that. I made a little logo and everything. But really, Malformity was my very first band in the early 90s, like 91, 90. Me and Eric started at that time.
Yeah. And how'd you get to know the guys? Because you formed in, of course, in 91, 92. So how'd you know everybody in the Atlanta scene?
And when we formed the original, there's two incarnations of Malformity. The original from the early 90s, it was me and Eric. We went to high school together.
Yeah.
And then in 06, I started jamming with Craig. We had a band called Lectures on the Apocalypse with another friend of ours, Billy. And Billy quit in 2013, and then and I knew Craig from going to GSU and from just shows in the Atlanta area after I moved. I moved to Atlanta in 98. So just meeting him and other people at shows, 98, 99, that's how we met. And then 2013, Billy quit, and right before he quit, Glenn joined, and I'd known him for a while. We first met in New Jersey at the Marshmallow Meltdown way back in 98, 99, and he moved to Atlanta, and we tried to get him in the band for a while, and he finally joined. And then when Billy quit, we got Eric in the band, and we decided to use the name of me and Eric's old band, Malformity. So that band was Lectures on the Apocalypse. So we were Lectures on the Apocalypse for a few years.
So that was sort of like the precursor to Malformity.
Yeah, the precursor to today's Malformity, yes.
All right. But I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the Black Holes to Heaven demo from the 92 or so. So yeah. Where was that recorded at? Because I was looking it up, and I was trying to prepare myself for this interview.
Yeah.
It's very raw sounding, just really old school death metal, the kind of shit I like. So where was that recorded at?
That was recorded in Auburn, Alabama at our friend Jamie's house. And Jamie actually mixed our album, Monumental Ruin. So we go back with him way back too. So yeah, that was when Malformity was me, Eric, a guy named Brian on drums, and we did that demo. We did 2 recordings of the demo. The first time was the 3 of us, and the 4th time, a friend of ours, John Martin, played second guitar, and he plays in a band now called Septarian. I think they're playing here pretty soon, but they're from the Auburn area. But yeah, so that was recorded in Auburn, Alabama, at our friend's house on a 4-track with Jamie Ertz.
All right, and then you started playing locally around Atlanta, but it was in '95 where Malformity just broke up. So what was sort of the reason for the breakup at the time?
We just kind of went our separate ways. We were in our 20s, so things were a lot different. Eric and Brian started a band called Disillusioned with 2 other friends of ours, Terry and John. And yeah, that's what happened back then.
Oh wow. Wow. And then, like during that breakup time, what were you personally like doing in the meantime?
Finishing school.
Alright. Simple answer to that, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then in 2014, Malformity got back together. So,
Mhm.
what made you guys decide to come back?
That's what I was mentioning earlier when, like me and Craig had lectures with Billy and I almost said Craig, with Billy and Glenn for a while, and then when Eric joined, we just changed the names of lectures to Malformity.
Nice. Nice. And of course, Lectures of the Apocalypse became like that little EP that you did in 2015.
Yeah, so when we did the EP, we named it after the old name of the band. And the lectures, we did a few shows from like 09 to 14. And there was a show, I think, like, we've got flyers all over here, but there's one of these flyers where even on the flyer, it says Malformity, formerly Lectures on the Apocalypse. So that's when we had just changed the name.
Yeah, I can't even know which one it is.
Yeah. I think it was one of Amos's early shows also.
Yeah, because I remember like the first time I saw you guys, I think that might have been the Deicide show that you did at,
Okay.
at the Earl. Oh, and I was like, this is a cool band. I thought that you'd been around, not around, but then I looked you up on Metal Archives. Like, damn, they've been around since the 90s, but then broke up for a while. Well, I was surprised myself. So, and I think I've seen almost every show that you all done since then. Like,
Okay.
and then of course your latest album was Monumental Ruin, which came out in 21. Personally, one of my favorite albums from that year.
Thank you.
So how has sort of like the album cycle been like for you guys?
What do you mean by the album cycle?
Sort of like the whole like playing shows and everything.
Well, right now we are working on writing songs for the next album. I think this year we only have a show in June coming up, June 1st, with Prime Mover, Dead Speak, and Imperi at Star Bar. But last year, December, we played a show at Boggs. Gosh, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Hey, you're good, man.
It wasn't the Mortuary show. I think that was August. December was Street Tombs. I can't remember. No, that was the Mortuary show. Anyway, so in November, we were in Tokyo for the Sakusai Death Fest.
Wow.
Yeah.
In Japan? Holy shit.
Yeah, we played Japan in November.
Was that like your first time playing outside of America?
Mm.
How was that experience?
That was awesome.
Yeah, I want to go to Japan. That's one of my bucket list goals.
Yeah.
Is like visit like all 7 continents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've only been to obviously the one.
Mhm.
Here.
I highly recommend going to Japan if you have any interest in any kind of Japanese stuff.
Yeah, but tell me about like sort of like the artwork for Monumental Ruin we got right there. It's just very like I love how it gives it kind of like just from the album artwork alone, it sort of gives like a darker kind of tone to it. Is that sort of like the whole vibe you wanted to get with the album?
Yeah. For the artwork, I think I just did a search for a lot of our song titles. The name of the album comes from Monumental Decay and Into Ruin. So we just took 2 of the songs and combined them to make the album title. So I Googled a bunch of the names and came up with found this guy, Jorge Jacinto from Portugal. And he normally did video game art. And it captured he had something that captured a lot what we were looking for. And we asked him to license it and do some modifications. And he delivered everything we requested that we asked for. You know, can you make this a little different? Can you put some crosses here? It was already kind of dark the way he had it. I think a theme of the album is it's a monumental ruin, kind of that things will occur and decay no matter if people are around or not. Like people are kind of insignificant, and these giant structures, nature or buildings or whatever will still be around long after people are gone and just become abandoned and decrepit. And the point being that, we're just kind of here momentarily, but everything around us will keep going on. The world doesn't revolve around us. Everything will keep going whether we're here or not.
Right, and I feel like it's not necessarily like a concept album, but I feel like there's sort of like a very conceptual kind of like vibe behind it.
Yeah, we kind of discovered that as we were writing the lyrics. Me and Eric write all the lyrics, and there was some point he said, we kind of touch on something similar on another song. I was like, yeah, you're right. So I think it just kind of happened.
Yeah. And death metal has been around for a long, long time, since the late 80s. And I was funny enough, like, yes, last night having a conversation with Danny from Malignancy about it. And I was telling him, because there's always, like, for me, death metal, there's always the three different waves. There's the first wave with, of course, Possessed and Death. And then the second wave, which, of course, the obvious bands like Cannibal Corpses and the Deicides and the Morbid Angels and Obituaries. And there's even, like, the newer bands like Sanguisugabog, Frozen Soul, 200 Stab Wounds. It always feels like death metal always comes in these waves and just a natural evolution. But also don't sound very different. Like Cannibal Corpse doesn't sound like Deicide, Deicide doesn't sound like Obituary, and Obituary doesn't sound like Malformity. So how do you feel about the whole death metal movement, like how it started versus where it is now?
I feel like when it started, like we have all these styles now, but back then, when I was in high school, junior high, there wasn't really concepts like death metal or black metal, different categories. I mean, maybe there were informally, but it wasn't like a thing that you see in the media or people talk about. It was just, this band sounds like this band sounds like this band sounds like this. And then I guess as those bands got popular and their sounds were popular, that more bands started coming out in those styles. And I think that's how we came up, how these categories got created. But I think as long as everyone's doing their thing and what they want to do, writing the music that comes out, I think it's all good.
Yeah, and then there's always the subgenres. There's the technical death metal, melodic death metal, metal blackened death metal. Sometimes it gets ridiculous. It almost kind of feels like naming like a species of plants in a way. wait, do you feel like subgenres like labeling like mean anything?
Not really. I guess it depends on, it's in the eye of the beholder. As long as you're writing the music you want to write and it comes out the way you want it to come out, that's all that counts. And someone else is going to categorize it, and you can let them. I don't think that matters, as long as the person writing the music, the people writing the music, are writing what they want to write.
Yeah. And of course, like you've been around since like the early 90s, and of course had that long break. How do you feel like the scene has evolved from like the 90s to where it is now in 2024?
That's funny you asked that, because I was actually kind of thinking about that the other day, where like I saw King Diamond at the Masquerade in the early 2000s, like 05 or something.
Wow.
And no one was there. There was not that many people. And then 2014, it was packed.
Yeah.
So in the early 2000s, right after I first moved to Atlanta, metalcore was big.
Yeah, but I think there was like the new metal was sort of like
right.
its peak, and then metalcore starting to slowly begin.
Right, yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And so at that time, the metal that we listened to wasn't, it kind of died down in popularity.
Yeah.
And then around 2011, 2012, I started meeting these younger kids like Mangled and Sadistic Ritual. I'm like, oh, this is good. These younger kids are having this interest in real metal, death and thrash, and not metalcore. And then a few years later, King Diamond at Tabernacle in 14 was packed.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is
Yeah, well, I saw them in 15 at the Tabernacle.
Okay, so probably 15. So it's nice to see how it is kind of going away. You see Carcass now playing these huge shows, Obituary playing these huge shows, where in 2011 Obituary played at that place near Georgia Tech, Archive Gallery, is that it?
I've heard of that place. I think I've been there once to see a friend's band. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, so, like in the mid-90s, you had Obituary doing really well at the Masquerade. Now Obituary is playing huge shows, but in that lull, 2011, they were playing a little venue next to Georgia Tech, and, I wasn't able to make that show. Yeah. I know they didn't have a lead guitarist on that tour, so I wasn't sure how the turnout was. But
because I saw them in a small venue. I saw them at Spartanburg, South Carolina at Ground Zero. If you've ever been there, it's that tiny-ass venue.
I've been there once, and that was in '99 for Samael and Monstrosity.
Damn, what a lineup.
Yeah, and there was someone else.
Yeah, the things I would have done to have been born 10 years earlier to see that.
What year were you born?
I was born in '94, so I'm 30 years old. So.
Okay.
But sometimes I look at like stuff. I mean, the closest we're gonna have to a time machine is YouTube. Yeah. That's why I see like some YouTube comments are like, "Oh yeah, I wish I had a time machine, and this is the closest we're gonna get." Yeah, but you've played live with like so many great bands. Like you played, I think I saw you with like Cannabis Corpse, which is different from a band like Deicide, and then you played with like Dark Funeral and Belphegor, which is like all different bands. So depending on like the different shows that you played, you never notice like a different like crowd type of like crowd interaction depending on the crowds that you play with?
You mean crowd interaction between us and the crowd?
Yeah, or just like how the vibes are between like the shows that you play with.
They're always good shows, especially these bigger ones. Yeah, all the big ones you've named, they've all got their big fan bases. And so when, someone like us comes up who's opening the show that, someone who, listens to Dark Funeral or Suffocation Camel Corpse might not know, some of the smaller bands or even the local openers like us. It's nice to see them showing up early. Usually they're probably there early just to get a good spot for the bands they really want to see.
Yeah.
But it's nice, when they give us a positive. It's really nice when they give a positive reaction to us. And I was always thinking that you're doing well if they're not leaving.
Yeah.
They might not be going nuts, but they're still there. So they're you're capturing their interest.
Yeah, and I feel like you definitely aren't just like for one specific style. I feel like you could appeal to like different audiences with your sound. Like you appeal to all like the death metal fans and black metal fans. So you have like pretty much the best of both worlds with the different fans that you play with.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I think that Dark Funeral show, you had Incantation on there and
The
some
Homies.
other death metal. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Some other death metal bands. So it was a nice mix. Yeah. So yeah, that one worked out. And A. Rippin got us on that, which was pretty nice.
Yeah. And one thing I want to talk about is sort of like your songwriting, because in terms of like coming up with lyrics, do you have to like put yourself in a certain mind frame in order to come up with lyrics, or does like making like lyrics just come like naturally and organically?
For me, I will start out with some kind of line I want to do, but since I'm playing too, I have to make sure that I can
Yeah, I was just
make the cadence match what I'm doing on guitar.
Yeah, and you pretty much led me into the next question, because also playing guitar, how do you manage to like sing and play at the same time? I always like to ask like musicians that do both.
My secret is making sure a lot of what I'm saying falls onto one. I know that's a little simple.
So you're like
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and you can have things as long as you're always falling on that downbeat. Of course you'll have phrases and words that are on the upbeats as you go, but your brain kind of goes into just automatic mode with guitar or vocals. You can't really concentrate on one fully. Your brain is kind of split with both.
Yeah, and do you ever feel like you try to like express like different sides of you with like singing and also playing guitar?
Yeah, I probably focus on guitar more. But when we're in the studio, I want to make sure my vocals sound as good as they can be. And it's always me and Eric recording at the same time, and Craig is usually there, and we're all bouncing ideas off of each other, feedback, like, you could do this a little better, why don't you try this again? And you want to express yourself the best you can and make sure you're expressing who you are and the sound you want to get. Maybe not so much trying to reach a sound that you think will satisfy the most people, but also yourself.
Yeah, and talking about like, because you have mentioned that you're also writing, like starting some work on the next Malformity release. So what is like the status with that, if you're allowed to say?
Oh yeah, we have 6 songs now, 6 or 7. We're gonna play a few of them at the show in June. Some ones that we haven't done before, but so we've got a lot of music done. I haven't started on lyrics yet. I think Eric already has. I think all of them have titles. Not all of them have titles yet, but I think we're aiming to do another 3 songs maybe.
Yeah, and still talking about the topic of guitar, because I feel like Malformity's guitar playing is very technical, but also rhythmic at the same time. Do you have like a knowledge of like music theory, like okay, which scale I'm playing in terms of soloing?
A little bit. I learned a lot of that from guitar magazines when I was like 14, 15. So I found in the early 90s, a lot of the Swedish bands were using, I can't remember which one it is, harmonic minor or natural minor. It's the one where the 7th note is sharp. But I find myself using that a lot, but I'm trying not to fall into that so much and just playing whatever sounds good. Not necessarily, am I making sure I'm in this scale?
Nice. Nice. And one last question I want to ask you is talking about like your gear, because when I seen you live, you always have like sick guitars and amps and everything. So I'm always curious, like, what's your go-to with axes and the pedals and amps and all that stuff?
I've always played Ibanez guitars. I've had this one since 98. And my 5150 head, I've had this since 95. It was actually right after Malformity broke up back then. These cabs, I guess I got one. I'm sure I got one of these in the 90s also. And then one of these, Glenn found a deal, someone selling 2 for 1 or something. But yeah, I've had this since 95, my 5150, and I love it. I love the way it sounds. I've had some work done on it by Wiggins, who does sound at the Earl, and by Jeff Bakos behind over there in Little 5 Points. But yeah, so usually Ibanez and 5150.
Nice. So thank you, man, for this conversation. It's great to finally have Malformity on the show. There's just anything else with the band you'd like to plug for the audience that are watching this?
Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Bandcamp. We've got merch. We've got music out there. We got our show June 1st at the Star Bar for local people with Prime Mover, Dead Speak, and Perry. Yeah, thank you for all the support. Thanks to everyone who's checked us out. And if you're going to check us out, thank you as well.
Awesome. So everybody, Dan from Malformity, see you next time.